Welcome to The Debate. Today is Monday, February 16, 2026.
And we're opening today with a look at a crisis that's really no longer just a headline. I mean, it's become a statistical reality that is reshaping the workforce. The new Burnout Report 2026, it paints a grim picture. We're seeing record numbers of workers exiting the workforce due to stress-related illness, with only about 1 in 4 employees feeling their mental health is even prioritized.
It's a massive wake-up call and frankly, a tragedy. But while the report focuses on the workplace, it forces us to confront a much older, more fundamental question about human biology and the way we navigate the world. So today we're asking, is stress inherently a biological toxin, a kind of mechanical failure of the body under load?
Or is it, as I suspect you'll argue, a misunderstood signal? A necessary force that only becomes destructive because of our psychological relationship to it.
I'll state my position clearly. I believe we are pathologizing a survival mechanism. My argument is that stress is a fundamental adaptive tool. The data shows that what we categorize as toxic stress is largely a product of our mindset and our habits of worry. By trying to eliminate stress or by fearing it, we're actually weakening our emotional muscles and lowering our resilience.
And I'm here to represent the physiological reality. My position is that stress is an objective, mechanical force. It's literally wear and tear. It causes quantifiable, structural damage to the brain and body, regardless of how you might try to, frame it. Biology has limits, just like steel, and we're currently exceeding them.
Okay, so we have a clear divide. I want to start by challenging the very language we use, because I think that is where the problem begins. We say, I'm stressed when we're late for a meeting, and we say the exact same thing, I'm stressed, when we're suffering a nervous breakdown. We are suffering from a crisis of definition.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning we conflate 3 distinct things: stress, worry, and anxiety. The psychology of managing pressure source material makes a crucial distinction here that we often miss. Worry is a habit. It's that repetitive what-if loop. Anxiety is unwarranted fear about the future. But stress is simply the conviction that we cannot cope with the challenges facing us.
That sounds like a semantic distinction for what ends up being the same chemical cascade in the blood. Whether you call it worry or stress, the cortisol is the same.
But the origin matters because the physiological intent matters. Physiologically, the stress response is designed to help us cope. It's resource mobilization. I look to the work of Stanford psychologist Kelly McGonigal. Her research argues pretty convincingly that the primary variable in health outcomes isn't the amount of stress, but our toxic relationship to it. If you view the racing heart and the adrenaline as a threat, your blood vessels constrict, you panic. But if you view it as the body preparing you for a challenge, the vessels stay relaxed. The physiology literally changes based on the belief.
That is a very appealing idea.
It is.
That we can think our way out of biology. But I have to ground this in the hard sciences. I'm looking at this through the lens of Hans Selye, the undisputed father of stress research. We have to remember where this word even comes from. Selye didn't pull stress out of a psychology textbook. He borrowed it directly from physics and continuum mechanics, which implies we are just objects being acted upon. In many ways, biologically, we are. In physics, stress is the interaction between a force and the resistance to that force. It is defined as force per unit area. It's not a feeling, it is a load. Selye's general adaptation syndrome maps this onto the body perfectly. You have the alarm phase, the resistance phase, and finally, the stage of exhaustion.
But we aren't bridges. We don't just collapse because the wind blows too hard.
The brain's center for memory. We're seeing the dysregulation of the HPA axis, the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal feedback loop. This isn't a mindset issue. This is organic damage. To suggest that this is merely a relationship problem, well, it ignores the objective structural damage that this force inflicts on the organism. Biological limits, like mechanical limits, are absolute.
Okay, I accept that biological limits exist. Of course they do. But I think you are confusing the mechanism with the outcome. Let's dig into this definition of stress you mentioned. You're holding tight to the physics definition, force per unit area.
Because it's accurate. Whether it's tensile stress, pulling a material apart, or compressive stress, pushing it together, the rule is the same. If the load exceeds the material's yield strength, you get permanent deformation. The material yields. It doesn't decide to yield, it simply fails physics. When we apply this to the human body, high blood pressure, arterial scarring, the stripping of neurons, these are mechanical failures under load.
That's a compelling argument if we were steel beams. But we are linguistic, meaning-making creatures. I would counter your physics definition with the definition of stress in linguistics.
Linguistics? You're going to fight biochemistry with grammar?
Bear with me. In language, what is stress? It provides prominence. It provides emphasis. If I say the word record versus record, the stress changes the meaning entirely. Without stress, language is flat, monotone, and robotic. It lacks information.
That's a lovely metaphor, but I'm not sure it holds up against cortisol.
Oh, it's more than a metaphor. It's how we function. In life, stress signals what matters to us. As McGonagall puts it, stress is a signal of meaning. We don't get stressed about things we don't care about. If you strip stress from a human life, you don't get a happy human. You get a bored, unmotivated one. You get a flat line. The physiological arousal you call load is actually the energy required to engage with what is meaningful.
I'm sorry, but I have to push back hard on that. You talk about meaning, but let's look at the raw data from Cellier's experiments. He didn't just observe people having bad days or struggling with a difficult project. He exposed rats to extreme stressors, placing them on freezing roofs, putting them on revolving treadmills where they couldn't stop. These rats were not searching for emphasis in their lives.
Granted, a rat on a cold roof isn't looking for purpose.
Exactly. And the result was always the same triad: adrenal hyperactivity, lymphatic atrophy, meaning the immune system collapsed, and peptic ulcers. Cellier called this a nonspecific response to damage. The body wasn't interpreting the cold roof as a challenge to overcome, it was simply degrading under pressure. That is the biological reality for the millions of workers in that burnout report. They aren't finding meaning, they are developing ulcers.
I think we need to be very careful about how we interpret those rat studies relative to human experience. You're focusing entirely on the exhaustion phase, the end state of abuse. But let's talk about the adaptation phase. I want to bring up the concept of hormesis.
The idea that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger?
Scientifically, yes. Hormesis is the phenomenon where a stressor, in the right dose, strengthens the organism. You mentioned Cellier, but let's look at the 2013 study cited in our material. It showed that rats exposed to moderate intermittent stress actually grew new neural connections.
Moderate is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
But it's the key variable. The study showed improved performance on memory tests. The stress forced the brain to become more alert, more capable. This aligns with the work of researchers Kaufer and Kirby at UC Berkeley. They found that intermittent stressful events keep the brain alert. You perform better when you are alert. This isn't damage, this is optimization. If we pathologize that energy, we rob ourselves of our own capacity for growth.
I challenge the idea that we can easily categorize stress as moderate and therefore safe. When we look at the biochemistry, the line between optimization and toxicity is incredibly thin. The 2024 neuroscience paper details the specific chemical fallout of stress, and it's frighteningly precise. We are talking about glutamate excitotoxicity.
That's a mouthful. Break that down for us.
So glutamate is your brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It's the gas pedal. It's what makes your brain fire and allows you to think. But under chronic stress, the brain dumps excessive amounts of glutamate into the synapses. It literally stimulates the brain cells to death. It burns them out.
Like flooding an engine.
Exactly. It destroys neurons in the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. This is coupled with the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines, molecules that induce inflammation in the brain. This isn't just being alert. This is the brain eating itself. It is a state of neuroinflammation that leads directly to cognitive decline and depression.
I don't deny that chronic, unremitting stress is harmful, but we must distinguish the mechanism from the duration. The body produces infection-fighting white blood cells during acute stress. A 2012 study showed this explicitly. The body prepares for survival. That is a feature, not a bug. The damage you're citing, the glutamate toxicity, the inflammation, that comes from chronic states.
And most modern life is a chronic state. That's the issue.
But what keeps it chronic? This is my critical point. Is it the job? Or is it the worry loop, the internal environment? The psychology of managing pressure source makes a vital distinction. Worry is a mental habit. When we worry, we sustain the stress response artificially. We keep the engine revving in the driveway until it overheats. That isn't the fault of the stress response. It's the fault of our inability to turn it off. We are confusing the fire engine, which is loud and disruptive but necessary, with the fire itself.
That's a convenient distinction, but I would argue it minimizes the environment. You're suggesting that if we just stop worrying, the biological toxicity disappears. But the Burnout Report 2026 indicates that the external pressures, the workload, lack of support, financial instability, these are objective realities. You can't mindset your way out of a 16-hour workday that is physically degrading your HPA axis.
Actually, the evidence suggests you might be able to. Or at least that mindset plays a much larger role than we give it credit for. I want to introduce a study by Alia Crum regarding financial institution employees.
I'm familiar with it, the UBS study.
Right. So this is a high-stress environment. Objectively, high stakes, long hours. They took these employees and split them into two groups. One group watched videos describing stress as debilitating. Essentially, they watched a video of your argument.
A video of the truth, I would say.
And the other group watched videos describing stress as enhancing, positioning it as energy that helps you perform, helps you focus. The result? The group that viewed stress as enhancing had improved health markers, fewer backaches, less insomnia, and higher productivity. The external load, the 16-hour days, was identical for both groups. The only variable that changed was their belief about what the stress was doing to them. This proves that the physiological response is malleable.
It proves that perception has some influence, yes. I won't deny that. But I would argue it has hard limits. Let's go back to mechanics, because I think the engineering analogy is the only one that keeps us honest. There's a concept called yield strength. You can have the most positive attitude in the world. You can believe that the load is making you stronger. But if a steel beam is subject to specific shear stress that exceeds its rating, it will fail. It will shear.
But we aren't passive materials. We have agency. We can repair.
Do we have agency over our DNA methylation? The neuroscience source discusses epigenetic changes caused by chronic stress. It mentions that stress can lead to increased DNA methylation of genes involved in neuroplasticity.
Explain that implication.
It means the very genes responsible for helping your brain adapt and learn are being chemically switched off. The stress leaves a molecular scar on your DNA. No amount of reframing reverses the chemical stripping of the prefrontal cortex once it reaches the stage of exhaustion. You can't negotiate with excitotoxicity. At a certain point, the biology just breaks.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because it treats the human organism as static, as if we have a fixed rating stamped on our foreheads at birth. The European team of psychologists cited in our material describes resilience not as a fixed trait, not as a fixed yield strength, but as a dynamic and adaptive process. We can build emotional muscles.
Emotional muscles is a metaphor. Atrophy is a physical reality.
But the metaphor maps to the biology. When we treat stress as a challenge rather than a threat, we shift the hormonal cocktail. We move from a fear-based response, avoidance, freezing, to a challenge response. This is the fight aspect of fight or flight utilized productively. By engaging with the stressor, by finding meaning in the struggle, we actually increase our capacity to bear the load.
So you're saying we can increase our yield strength?
Precisely. The factor of safety, to use your mechanics term, is determined by our psychological capacity to find meaning in the struggle. If we view the load as meaningless suffering, we break. If we view it as necessary for a goal we care about, we endure, and we often grow.
I will concede that the factor of safety is a useful concept here. In engineering, we design structures to withstand loads far higher than they will ever likely encounter. We build in a buffer. My concern with your stresses-enhancing approach is that it encourages people to redline their engines, eating into that safety factor until they experience catastrophic failure. It risks becoming toxic positivity. Oh, you're having a heart attack. Just reframe it as passion.
That is a fair critique. We don't want to gaslight people who are suffering, but consider the alternative. My concern with your stress is a toxin approach is that it makes people afraid of their own bodies. It creates a secondary layer of stress, being stressed about being stressed.
That's true. The 2006 study did show that a negative attitude toward emotions makes one more vulnerable to panic attacks.
Exactly. If you believe the racing heart is a sign of damage, you spiral. You think, I'm killing my brain cells right now. That fear releases more cortisol, which causes more racing heart. It's a feedback loop from hell. But if you believe it's energy, if you say, my body is giving me the resources I need to handle this, you utilize it. We need to stop trying to eliminate stress, which is impossible. We need to distinguish between worry, the useless habit, and stress, the adaptive impulse. Our goal should be to use that impulse as a driver for flow and connection.
I agree that we cannot eliminate stress. Celsius himself said that complete freedom from stress is death. To be alive is to be under tension. However, we must respect the mechanics of our biology. We are materials with breaking points. The stage of exhaustion is real. Chronic stress is physically inflammatory. It alters the structure of the brain in ways that can take years to repair. While mindset plays a role, we cannot ignore the fact that the load itself matters. Sometimes the solution isn't to reframe the 16-hour workday. Sometimes the solution is to quit the job.
It seems we're converging on a nuanced middle ground. The load matters, yes. We shouldn't seek out abuse, but the structural integrity of the vessel, the human being, is reinforced by purpose, connection, and the belief that the struggle has value.
Agreed. We must respect the biological load, the physics of the situation. But perhaps the factor of safety is determined by that psychological capacity you describe. We are machines, in a sense, but we are machines that run better when we understand why we are running.
Well said. We navigate the load by managing the meaning. There is certainly more to explore in this material, particularly regarding the specific techniques for building that resilience.
And the specific biological interventions for when the damage has been done.
Thank you for joining the debate.
Thank you.